Welcome back to Read the Bible in Lockdown. How are you going with 1 Kings? Hope you're getting lots out of it and being stretched in your knowledge of God and your understanding of how He has worked through salvation history. We are heading to the temple being built, and we'll see this in 2 chapters of 1 Kings, which I won't read all of it, but I'll point some things out. Hope it's helpful in you knowing God better today. Let's go to 1 Kings.
1 Kings chapter 6. In the 480th year after the Israelites came out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, the 2nd month, he began to build the temple of the Lord. So we start here with a reminder of Israel's history as a nation. They came out of Egypt many years ago, and now Solomon is ruling over them. And in his 4th year of his reign, he begins to build the temple of the Lord. A great fulfillment of prophecy. Remember, David was told that his son would build a temple of the Lord. And then in our next 2 chapters, we get a thorough description of how the temple was built and what's inside the temple, its furnishings. Let me read a little bit of that to you now from verse 2. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 wide, and 30 high. The portico at the front of the main hall of the temple extended the width of the temple, that is 20 cubits, and projected 10 cubits from the front of the temple. A cubit, by the way, is a measure of a unit of measurement back then. Verse 4, he made narrow windows high up in the temple walls. Against the walls of the main hall in the inner sanctuary, he built a structure around the building in which there were side rooms. The lowest floor was 5 cubits wide, the middle floor 6 cubits, and the third floor 7. He made offset ledges around the outside of the temple so that nothing would be inserted into the temple walls. In building the temple, only blocks dressed at the quarry were used, and no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. The entrance to the lower floor was on the south side of the temple. A stairway led up to the middle level, and from there to the third. So he built the temple and completed it, roofing it with beams and cedar planks, and he built the side rooms all along the temple. The height of each was 5 cubits, and they were attached to the temple by beams of cedar. The word of the Lord came to Solomon, "As for this temple you are building, if you follow my decrees, observe my laws, and keep my commands, and obey them, I will fulfill through the promise I gave to David your father, and I will live among the Israelites, and will not abandon my people Israel." So Solomon built the temple and completed it. Let me just look in on this end bit here. Firstly, the word of the Lord came to Solomon, and here we see God saying, okay, with the building of the temple, that's exactly what I want you to do, but now comes the hard work of following the Lord's decrees, keeping his commands, obeying them, because that's how God's people are to live. And if that's how they live, then God will fulfill his promise and he will dwell with his people and not abandon them. So if they're going to be the Lord's people, they need to live as the Lord's people. And so as we read the rest of the book of Kings, we'll see whether God's people keep their end of the promise. But what I'd love you to do is, if you've got time, read through the rest of chapter 6 and chapter 7. Now, these are chapters which we normally skip over because they're all about the little minutiae of how the temple was built or what are the things inside the temple, and we don't really understand, we may not really understand the meaning behind it all. But what I want you to do, as you read chapters 6 and 7, they describe the temple for us. Without descriptions like this, we wouldn't be able to, here's a picture of the temple. We can only, this side of the destruction of the temple, we can only get pictures like this or recreate pictures like this because of all the detail that God gives in the Bible. And 1 Kings was written most likely to God's people who were in exile, who were away from Jerusalem after this temple had been destroyed. And so for them, it's kind of, it's their a way to access what this temple would have been like, in all its glory, in all its possibility to have access to God the Father. And so read through chapter 6 and 7 and think about, okay, here is Israel's access to God, and appreciate the splendor of the temple, but particularly this was how God's people had access to God the Father. But of course, this side of Jesus, we have new access. We don't need a temple. We have Jesus, who is the temple. And so in a verse like Ephesians 2, verse 18, it says, "For through him, through Jesus, we both, Jew and Gentile, have access to the Father by one Spirit." So we have a new way of accessing God the Father through Jesus and his death on the cross. By the power of the Spirit, we now have access to God the Father. So read about these two chapters of how the temple was built so that the people can have access to God the Father. And then why don't you reflect? Why don't you praise Jesus for our access to God the Father? You can praise the Holy Spirit as well. And then enjoy your access to God. Pray to him. Give thanks to God for him. Celebrate your adoption as his sons and daughters today.